So welcome everybody to our July virtual education session. Sorry about little hiccups, but these are the joys of the online world. So I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Louise Inglese and I'm the Vice President of Scleroderma Victoria. We're so glad you could join us for this month's virtual education session for people living with scleroderma. So whether this is your first time attending or you're a returning participant, we're happy to have you as part of our growing community. This month's session their monthly sessions are designed to inform, support, and empower those affected by scleroderma. Whether you're living with the condition, caring for someone who is, or simply looking to learn more, each month we bring an expert speaker, share valuable resources, and provide a space for connection and conversation. Our goal is to help you feel more informed about managing scleroderma and its symptoms, stay updated on the latest research and treatment options, and most importantly, remind you that you're not alone on your journey. We encourage you to engage, ask questions, and connect with others in our chat or during the question and answer session at the end. So thanks for being here, and we're excited to learn and grow together. So today's session, we've got our wonderful guest speaker on vascular disease in systemic sclerosis. And then we've got our questions, and then we're going to have a bit of a recap on our World Scleroderma Day 2025. Okay, Amanda, do you want to start recording?
I think it already is.
Oh, is it?
It is.
It is. Oh, we are already. Excellent. That's even better. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Virginia Hickey, who is a principal at the board table and is a corporate governance specialist, board advisor, and strategy facilitator, lawyer, and company director with extensive commercial, government, and non-for-profit experience. A highly regarded facilitator and educator who's also facilitated at major public policy events, including a broad range of stakeholders, including at the South Australian Economic Development Summit and the South Australian Constitutional Convention. Virginia is committed to working with organisations to raise standards of governance, to clarify strategic direction, and to develop strong governance frameworks to support robust decision-making. She's very experienced, having had a portfolio of board positions, serving on around 20 boards over a 20-year period. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you as a presenter at our virtual education sessions, Virginia. So I shall stop sharing this screen, or can I actually share this tab instead? Maybe I can do that.
Fabulous. That's great for me. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry, a few glitches this morning. But I'm really happy to be with you and to report to you on the work that I've been doing with this OMERACT working group, and for which Scleroderma Australia funded or assisted me in attending a conference in May in Terrassa, which is just out of Barcelona. So I'm here to thank you and also to tell you what I've learned and to share that with you. So I'll just start off by saying that the thing I'm reporting on is this is called the OMERACT Vascular Disease Working Group, and I'll explain that in a second. But just to say, OMERACT is a oh, I've got that on the next slide. Maybe we'll go straight to that. If you could go straight to the next slide, thank you. So I just need to give you the context of what this working group is, and then get down into what it has been working on and what that means for people like us who are patients with scleroderma. So it's a not-for-profit organisation. It's global, and it came out of a couple of rheumatologists in 1992 deciding or realising that there needed to be an improved way of reporting on the outcomes of autoimmune and musculoskeletal disease, and so that there was it improved the design and quality of clinical studies, and that would lead to better treatment for patients. And it was across rheumatology. So scleroderma, of course, is just one aspect, but one we're all very focused on, no doubt. It's a little bit technical. It gets terribly technical. I'll try not to go too far down that rabbit hole because it won't be much help. But what they're really all about, OMERACT, is groups doing working groups identifying a problem or a gap that needs to be improved to come up with what they call core outcome sets. And they're outcomes that researchers have agreed define the minimum outcomes to be measured and reported in all clinical trials in relation to a specific health condition like scleroderma. And so there's a two-phase process of which is what we've been working on for a long time now. You first of all have to identify what it is you need to measure, and then you have to measure those domains through instruments. And so this conference I attended in May in Terrassa was all about presenting the work that we were doing to the other work groups. There must have been over a couple of hundred people there with different work groups from different areas of rheumatology. So hopefully I'll be able to make this come to life a bit as we continue on through the presentation. But so that's what OMERACT's about, and that's where this working group comes from. Next slide, please. So one of the great things about OMERACT, it's very patient focused, and it builds in patient research partners, which is what I am, into each stage of its process to come up with these outcomes. And you can see from the quote that I've pulled from their website that the vision, the PRP, that's the patient research partners vision, is for one where patients are seamlessly involved. And that requires actually being trained in the basic ways of the research that OMERACT are using. So I've had many online training sessions along the way to understand what on earth's going on and how, as a patient, as part of a group, I can make a useful contribution. So it's very, very much focused on getting this patient input. Next slide, please. Oh my goodness. Well, there we have a photograph which has gone sideways, but that doesn't matter. They're the patient research partners who attended the conference in Barcelona. And if you can, I'm the second one down horizontally with a yellow jumper around my neck. That's me. The other people are largely from other groups. But if you keep going down, you'll get to a lady with red hair, and she was the other patient partner in my group. Anyway, that was for a bit of colour and movement, but that's even more movement than I expected with the different drive. So basically at this conference, all of these people in this photograph were patient research partners with different groups, and two of us were from this scleroderma group. Next slide, please. So now getting into the actual group itself. So this is just a photograph or a collection of photographs of the members of this working group. And the top four photographs are professors who are rheumatologists and researchers. And then in the bottom line, we've got two research fellows who are also rheumatologists, and then Edith and myself, who are the patient research partners. And so we've been working together for about 4 years on the work that this group is doing, which seems extraordinary. I joined the group at the request of my my specialist, Susanna Proudman, who's a co-chair, as you can see in that photograph, just before COVID. And it was pitched to me on the basis of, well, if you'd like to be part of this, it'll culminate in a meeting in Colorado in, must have been 2019 or 2020, whenever COVID hit. And you can go off to the conference. We'll send you off to the conference. Anyway, of course, that conference didn't go ahead because of COVID. And 4 years later, I finally got to meet this group in Spain, in Spain this year. All right, next slide, please. So what this group's doing is looking at vascular disease in scleroderma. Next slide. And there's a lot that which I'll just go through really quickly. You all know about scleroderma. The bit we're going to, this group is concentrating on is, I can't use my pointer, but anyway, the digital ulcers and Raynaud's phenomenon. So it's the vascular aspects of scleroderma. And you can see from those numbers, I'll mention again later, that 90 to 95% of people who have scleroderma suffer from Raynaud's phenomenon, and 40 to 50% also have digital ulcers. And so that's what this working group is focusing on. And there's certainly two conditions that I have some experience with as a patient. Next slide, please. You might have to click a couple of times here. Yeah, okay, thank you. So really just, this is a slide from my working group of the pathological features, but what we're looking at here is the vasculopathy, Raynaud's phenomenon, and digital ulcers. Next slide, please. That's just really the same thing again, except the photograph of digital ulcers is not turned up in that one. Oh, so that's there, it's on the second click. Terrific. So that's what this group are looking at. Next slide, please. So some of these, so here are the figures again. Yeah, 95% of people with Raynaud's phenomenon, with scleroderma, have Raynaud's phenomenon, and 50% develop to having digital ulcers. Next slide. This is just probably these photographs. You may recognise some of this, the colour change from in Raynaud's phenomenon to white to blue to red. Next slide, please. And then some unpleasant photographs of digital ulcers. Okay, next slide. So you can click again, I think, please, and one more time. Thanks. So this is really just a slide to show the current management of Raynaud's phenomenon with the non-pharmacological and on the pharmacological side. And I'd be fascinated to know, well, I can't probably get everyone on the screen, but I'm imagining probably everyone or a large number of people on this call, if you have scleroderma, you probably have Raynaud's as well. And so you may recognise, as I did when I became involved in this group, these non-pharmacological management, which, you know, a lot of which is keeping warm, hand warmers, avoiding triggers like caffeine. I don't think I've been paying attention to that one, actually. I'm not sure if I don't know if I'm going to adopt that management technique, but the various different ways in which we try to adapt and try to treat Raynaud's in non-pharmacological ways. Sally, great. You, I don't know if the thumbs up is saying you're not going to have caffeine or that you're doing all those things. But so there's the non-pharmacological and then the pharmacological, which I won't go through. Some of you may have taken some of these medications. I have taken some. The first line, nifedipine, certainly I've taken. And then moving down to second line and severe pharmacological interventions, or they're interventions where the condition is more severe. Next slide, please. So actually on the same slide, you see down the bottom in red is just clicked up, the punchline, which is what the people who have been working with this condition for or in the research area for a long time have found is that there's very limited evidence of efficacy in the clinical trials around Raynaud's phenomenon, and that's related to a lack of objective and reliable and feasible information. And that's really part of what this whole OMERACT working group is all about, trying to improve the evidence base. Next slide, please. And you can flick through this one. Thanks, Louise. And this is some of the management of digital tip ulcers. Harder to manage, much more, the symptoms of which are, I haven't suffered very badly from this, but certainly my other patient research partner in the group has had very bad ulcers and have found it very difficult to manage, suffered a great deal of pain and great deal of functional disability as a result of the condition. So, and again, there's non-pharmacological treatments and pharmacological treatments. But again, if you click one more time, Louise, the same punchline, limited evidence of the efficacy in clinical trials. So if you want to move on, again, thanks, Louise. Next slide. So what the starting point for this working group was before I joined, but they determined that the current instruments for measuring Raynaud's phenomenon and digital ulcers haven't been validated. And so validated instruments are needed to assess the response to treatment in clinical trials. So it's a big gap, and that's what this group is trying to fill, to get to a point where the evidence is better for clinical trials, which will then lead to better treatments available for patients. Next slide. So this is some of the activity that I won't step you through it all, but this is why it sort of has taken years to even develop, take this working group to where it is now. It's gone through a series, it does qualitative research, it's done scoping reviews, looked at some candidate domains. I think I've actually given you a slide set here, which is in a different order. So I'm going to stop for a sec and just explain what domains are, because, I'll come to a slide on that, I think. So this is just the various steps that you have to go through in this process with OMERACT to get an endorsement about the core sets, which will allow better understanding of the outcomes and therefore lead to better clinical trials. Next slide, please, Louise. So what the group has been working on is developing domains. There, a domain in OMERACT language is an aspect of the condition which needs to be measured so that you can work out what a better clinical outcome is. So we've worked on these domains, and they'll come up in a later slide. And now the second part, and we presented that to the workshop in Spain. And now the group's working to select instruments. That's ways of measuring these domains so that we can, that they're valid for use in clinical trials. Next slide, please. So these are the core domains which our group came up with and has had endorsed. And if you look at the bottom part of that slide, this you can see now what a domain is. It's something like pain intensity due to Raynaud's phenomenon. And you can see the ones these have been determined by this group, but then in consultation with the larger interest group to work out what are the key things to focus on measuring in order to see how disease is progressing or how treatment is impacting on the condition. So you can see there some of the things that have already been agreed that we should focus on: pain intensity, severity of attacks, duration of attacks, frequency of attacks, and on life impact. And you can see some of the aspects of that: life impact on function, quality of life, and on daily life and adaptation, and resource use if there is a need for hospitalisation, which I think is very uncommon with Raynaud's phenomenon, more so with, but it's less so with digital ulcers. And then up the top of the slide, you can see there's some other domains which are still under consideration. And these have been worked up by the working group, but we also sent around questionnaires, and some of you may have even received these, because I think Scleroderma Australia did send these out to the questionnaires out to some of the members of Scleroderma Australia to express views on some of these domains and whether they are the things that you as a patient think needs measuring. So there was a combination of what patients thought their reactions to these domains were, what researchers and treaters view was about what the most important things to measure were. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this one. I think just click through this. It seems to be malaligned, so we won't worry about those little red things. Now, the next slide's about digital ulcers. Same thing again. We've got to some core domains which that need to be measured, and these have been agreed by the OMERACT community. So we will now be moving to work out how to measure. So you can see in the case of digital ulcers, pain intensity, very important thing to measure, how many digital ulcers, the healing, the global burden of digital ulcers, the overall effect of it on the patient, and an instrument already in existence, a physician global assessment. Life impact can be very significant with digital ulcers, and it's health-related impact on the quality of life. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think we've probably got a bit too much technical stuff on the next few slides, but let me just talk through. So next slide. No, this is actually not so technical. This is good. So to come back to really what we're trying to achieve here is what needs to be, what are the outcomes that need to be measured and how? And so the second phase of this is now the group is looking at what instruments need to be used to measure these outcomes. And so that we can move towards getting better treatment through clinical trials. Next slide, please. All right, this I'm not going to go through in detail, but it's quite a laborious process going through this OMERACT way. And very briefly flicking through these, we now need to understand what we're trying to measure. So next slide. And then we need to use work out what's the right instrument to measure. Next slide, please. And we need to make sure that these measurements are truthful, they match, that they're feasible, they're practical to use for patients and for clinicians, that they're truthful, they make sense, and they can discriminate between different groups of interest. Next slide. Thanks. Then when we work out some possible instruments, we ask collaborators, which includes patients, people with lived experience, whether the instrument, a good example of an instrument in the case of scleroderma and Raynaud's phenomenon, digital ulcers, is a questionnaire. So I'm sure many of you as patients complete questionnaires from time to time, often the same questionnaire over a longitudinal period. And they ask you questions about your condition and how you're experiencing it at particular times. And so that's an example of an instrument. And a lot of these instruments that we're looking to develop are questionnaires that allow us to better understand the experience. Next slide, please. So you can probably click through these. I think I've sort of mentioned them already. Yeah, and click through again. Next slide. So we end up with a series of instruments, and then they go through a process. Just keep clicking through this. Thank you, and thank you. Next one. And in the end, we end up with some instruments. I'll pause there for a second. So these instruments, things like questionnaires, or they could be more things like radiological imaging, or a variety of ways of working out what's going on. There are some existing instruments already in existence, and some of those have been considered by this group, and they're on this slide here. But I'll flick through to the next one. So I just put this up here as an example, because if you're like me, you've filled in questionnaires like this from time to time, and might not be this one, but here's one about pain intensity. It's already in use, but it's not in use in relation to what we're studying at the moment. So could we use this? Could this be made relevant for Raynaud's phenomenon and for digital ulcers? So you can click through, please, Louise. Yes, and to the next one. So there were some specific instruments which do look like they may be something we can adopt, and they've got to go through this process of being approved by the or endorsed by the OMERACT group. Next slide. And I think we'll just click through this too. Next slide. Here's some more examples of instruments, the kinds of questionnaires we get asked to fill in from time to time. And again, this is another one which is already in existence about physical function, which might also be useful to use in relation to Raynaud's phenomenon and digital ulcers. Next slide. And next slide. And next slide. Sorry, I did actually wean some of these things out, but I've shared the version which had probably a few too many technical slides in. But this was an interesting thing to me when I was trying to work out, well, so what? Where's this all leading? What does it all mean? I learned that the FDA, so the US, drug authority, which approves drugs for usage, it's very focused on wanting to see clinical benefit based on robust clinical outcome assessments that describe or reflect how an individual feels, functions, or survives. So, in other words, this work, and it's being informed, highly informed by patients' experience, is a focus area for the FDA, for example. So that's the sort of the importance and power of doing these this technical work on coming up with outcome assessments that can be that are sort of universally applicable to these particular conditions, something the FDA wants to see in its assessments. Next slide, please. Okay, so this actually is linked to that previous one about the FDA's interest. Here's I think probably if you have experienced Raynaud's phenomenon, this slide will speak to you. The kind of impacts that it has on a patient, some of the symptoms, and also the impacts, and so all of this information is things we're trying to distill into these outcomes, which can form the basis for clinical trials, and where there'll be a common language, global common language, so that researchers will be looking at the same outcomes, and that will make it more useful for meta-analyses, and also more useful for, as I say, meeting the needs of regulators and for drug companies who are developing treatments for these conditions. Next slide. Thanks. This I just put up here because it was really interesting through this whole process, because you go through all these iterations of trying to work out what are the most important things to measure. And this little slide just is a snapshot in time of when we got some results from the surveys which we sent out about what are the most important things to measure. And sometimes you got a real a difference of emphasis between patients and the clinicians. So that was a very interesting thing to deal with in the group. So in this one, you can see something that patients thought was important to measure was coldness. Whereas on the other side, some of the measures, these measures were often also regarded as important by patients, but maybe less so than coldness. So it was about, oh, okay, so patients are experiencing this differently, and we as clinicians, or not me, but they as clinicians, had not realised that. And that's really, I guess, one of the reasons for keeping patients so deeply involved at every level of this working group process. So it's a bit of a sense check on clinicians who obviously experienced and have seen a lot of things and have worked with a lot of patients, and yet sometimes there's something that seems glaringly obvious to patients which hasn't been picked up on by the clinicians, and they take that into account and realise, okay, it's something we need to understand better. Because I always stress, say with Raynaud's phenomenon, that it's so much a patient experience and very hard to measure in other ways. So it's only by understanding what patients are experiencing, largely, that they get the information that they need. And another one just to pause on here, and I don't know if anyone else with Raynaud's phenomenon sees it this way, because we're all different. But on the right hand, in the areas more favoured by clinicians, you can see they've got, you can see the beginning of the words about one thing they think should be measured is the frequency and duration of attacks. And for me as a patient, I thought, I don't know what an attack is for me, for Raynaud's phenomenon. It's something that seems to be around all the time, and when the weather gets cold, it gets worse, and then I take efforts to adapt and to wear gloves and to warm my hands and feet in other ways. And, you know, I see Petra sort of nodding, yes, that constant adaptation. Sometimes I think we don't realise how much we adapt and need to adapt to try to manage conditions. Sally again's with me on that. Thank you, Sally. And so I found, and so we had really interesting discussions in the work group about this. Now, other patients may think about them in terms of attacks, so that might be just my experience. But it's just the terminology was interesting, and a really good interchange between clinicians and patients in our group. But also the researchers who are doing the scoping reviews and looking at all the medical literature already in studies available, that was coming out of their research as well. They said, yeah, that's just not the way necessarily that patients are describing it. So they didn't ditch these as areas to consider, but it broadened their horizons about what to think of and what the patient experience was. Thank you. Next slide. This is just an example of a questionnaire which is already in existence, which could and possibly will also be used for Raynaud's. And I just flashed it up there because it's got so much information about, and for me as a patient, reading all of the information in this box about the physical symptoms, frequency and duration of attacks, which of course didn't resonate so much with me, the emotional impact of Raynaud's, when it stops you being able to do things. You know, for me, I know, you know, just you can wear your gloves, but you've got to take your hands out of your gloves to, you know, do lots of things, including operate your phone. And sometimes my fingers don't register on the phone because they're too cold. And, you know, you've got to put, or you used to have to put money in the meter, not so much now. But all those daily tasks that are made more difficult and which have an emotional impact, not just a physical impact. And so I was very happy to see that that was already well and truly under consideration in this field. I won't go through all of those, but I found this is an existing instrument that they're looking at to see, or maybe we could use this in Raynaud's phenomenon. So yeah, just to try to bring to life what we're talking about when we're talking about these instruments that we need to identify. Next slide, please. I think we can move on from that. Thank you. So here are some conclusions. You can put them all up, please, Louise. Okay, sorry. Look, the short point out of, well, yeah, I think we'll just go through those. They're not actually all that helpful to this discussion. Thanks. And click again. Next slide. And this was just a slide that was from our meeting in Barcelona, Terrassa in Spain, because we were presenting all of this information only in much more detail to the special interest group who attended our working group presentation. And then just to explain, we then send out to things to the larger group who are interested, and they respond by SurveyMonkey. And so this is this constant, we do the foundational work, we send it out to members of the interest group who are interested. Sometimes we send it to larger groups, which may have included people like you, to try to get as many possible perspectives on where we should land on both the domains and the instruments that we're suggesting should go forward and be adopted as universal for clinical trials or reporting on clinical trials in relation to these conditions. Next slide. Thanks. Next slide. And click again. Okay, so here are some of my insights. Pause after that long sort of, quick run through what's been 4 years of methodological work, which is quite dry and therefore hard to share. But here are my key insights out of my involvement with this group. That Raynaud's phenomenon and digital ulcers are conditions which are understudied and undertreated. They're the words of the clinicians who, that's why they think this is a gap, and that's why all the researchers, and that's why they wanted to work on it. And why, after going through all that technical stuff, I sort of stood back and said, why? Why does this matter? Why is this important? And it's so conditions can be better understood and better treated. So it just comes back to that. And then I've quoted again the FDA, who want to see that clinical benefit that reflects how individuals feel, function, or survive. So that was the key sort of out of this whole exercise. I keep coming back and go, so why are we doing this again? What's this all about when you go down that rabbit hole of all the methodology? Another insight was the rigor of the research methodology. It's been developed by this not-for-profit because a couple of rheumatological researchers in 1992 worked out that it was a problem, that there weren't universal outcomes that could be leveraged. And then they have formed a community, all voluntary, over the last decade and more, to have a methodology about how they take this, how we as a community take this forward. And it's very rigorous, and they go to great lengths. It's also very collaborative, as I've tried to point out in some of the things that I've described about how we go backwards and forwards and collaborate and get input from various groups and people. And it's very consensus-based. So they have a methodology for coming to consensus on where we land on the ultimate sort of product, if you like. My other insight is the time the process takes. I can't believe it's taken 4 years and we're still just moving on to doing the instruments. But we're not a slow group. In fact, we're apparently faster than many others, but it's really complicated. And I guess people are doing it. It is the day job of people like researchers, because it's all the part of what they do. But clinicians, researchers, and patients are coming together to do these things in after hours time, and then work up, after hours, the work in between, and touch base with all the various touch points along the way. So it is actually quite a time-consuming process because of that complexity. Another insight was the commitment of time by the PRP, the patient research partners. I don't think I had any idea what I was getting into when I got into this. I didn't think it was going for 4+ years, and I didn't realise I'd be sitting up on a virtual conference for monthly. And of course, Australia being Australia, you know, it goes something like this. It's about 8:30 in Philadelphia time, where the main chair of the group resides and works. In the UK, it might be, I don't know what time it is, let's say it's 10:30 a.m. or something. And the chair will say, so it's 8:30 here in Philadelphia, and what time is it there in the UK? And they'll say 10:30, and then he'll say, and who knows what time it is in Australia? You know, so it's like, and my specialist and I, who are both on the wall, go, we know, and it's midnight, and we're just starting. And I'm like, and I'm a patient. Should I really be sitting up this late? So there is that, you know, Australian connection challenge, that you're doing this work in the middle of the night often, and it's quite taxing, and it also makes it a bit harder to think straight. And they're not inflexible. It's just that there are some real practical difficulties about lining up the windows, and as you probably know, Australia often misses out in that lineup. So I found that a little bit challenging, and we had a meeting last night. It started at 10:30. I was delighted. It was an early one. Anyway, the last insight I have is that it is a very patient-centred approach and a patient-centred culture. They're always asking us what we think. And sometimes it's kind of crazy. Like for the first year, it felt like they're asking us what we thought about medical research methodology, just like, how do you do the desktop research in medical methodology? Not a clue. I have no way of knowing, and neither does the other patient. But they always asked us, which was very kind of them. But we can't contribute on everything, but we certainly listen to, and there are some areas where we can really bring the patient experience to life. So I'm sorry that's been a bit of a runaway train presentation, but I'd love to now see if you've got any questions or comments. I'm not sure if I've, you know, in going through it that quickly, I'm able to bring it to light. So please do ask me anything you'd like about what I've just spoken about.
Well, that was wonderful. It was a wonderful insight, and well done to you, Virginia, for committing so much time and effort and energy into it. And I know that everybody can fully understand the fact that there is patients advising researchers and clinicians and all of that. We know they come from a great space, but they don't always get what it's like to be as the patient. So it's fantastic to see that they're being so collaborative. So if anyone wants to pop up their hands and ask a question, or you can pop it in the chat as well, if you've got